Night had fallen on the village, covering everything with a dark blanket. Only the moon barely illuminated the deserted streets. Raphtalia, who had barely recovered from the injuries she had received in battle, walked through the deserted forest in search of shelter. Her heart was heavy, and her head was spinning from fatigue. Suddenly, her ears caught a strange rustling sound among the trees, which did not give her peace. She stopped, trying to understand what kind of sound was following her. A light breeze rustled the leaves, but the sounds were much closer than the wind could have been. Raphtalia became wary, her hand reaching for her sword. She moved on, but the sound grew louder, as if someone was walking right behind her, trying to stay in the shadows. Suddenly, a silhouette appeared in front of her, as if it had dissolved from the darkness. It was a girl, at first glance ordinary, but her eyes glowed with an ominous fire. She did not say not a word, just a smile, revealing a row of razor-sharp teeth. "Who are you?" Raphtalia asked quietly but firmly, feeling her heart begin to beat faster. The girl stepped forward, and her appearance began to change. Bloody cuts appeared from under her clothes, and her skin acquired a sickly grey hue. "I am the one you couldn't save," she whispered, and at that moment Raphtalia realized that in front of her was the ghost of one of the souls she had lost on the battlefield. Raphtalia clutched her sword, but her hands were shaking. "I did everything I could," she whispered, feeling fear creeping into her very heart. "It wasn't enough," the ghost's voice whispered, and its image began to multiply. Now there were dozens of the same ones standing around Raphtalia, with dead eyes, silent screams, and accusing looks. Raphtalia tried to fight back, but her blows passed through the ghostly figures without causing them any harm. They were gradually approaching, their whispers becoming louder and louder, turning into an unbearable scream. This sound penetrated her very consciousness, causing unbearable pain. "You failed us!" The voice of the ghosts echoed in her head. "You couldn't save us!" Raphtalia desperately tried to defend herself, but it was in vain. Every time she took a step back, the ghosts came closer. She was surrounded, and Raphtalia felt how the cold of their touch began to take away her strength. The darkness was shrinking around her, and it seemed that she could not escape this nightmare. But suddenly she heard a familiar voice, "Raphtalia." It was Neofumi. His scream cut through the darkness like a light in the night. In that moment, she realized that she was not alone, that there was someone who would always be there. Part 2, Call of the Night. After that night, Raphtalia couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows of her past were still watching her. The ghosts she saw in the forest left a deep mark on her heart. Neofumi noticed her isolation, but knowing how hard it was for her to share her fears, he decided not to push, giving her time. However, the nights became more and more restless. Raphtalia began to have nightmares in which the shadows of her past were sucking the life out of her. Each awakening was like a hammer blow to her heart. She trembled in fear, afraid to fall asleep again. One night, when the moon was especially bright, Raphtalia woke up to a strange whisper. The room was plunged into darkness, and only a thin strip of light penetrated through the half-open door. The whispers grew louder, and after listening closely, Raphtalia realized that they were coming not from outside, but from inside her heads. These were the same voices of the ghosts that accused her of not saving them. Raphtalia clutched her head in her hands, trying to muffle the screams, but they only grew louder. Desperate, she ran out of the room so as not to wake Neofumi and the others. She wanted to be strong, to handle everything herself, but the darkness seemed to be consuming her consciousness. Her legs carried her deeper into the forest, to where she first encountered those eerie shadows. Soon, Raphtalia found herself at the very point where the ghosts appeared before her. She froze, realizing that she had not ended up here by chance. The voices in her head became quieter, but now they seemed more conscious, as if she were being led to something. "You must free us," a voice came from the shadow of a tree. Raphtalia froze, peering into the darkness. Where she expected to see ghosts, there was nothing. But the feeling of their presence grew even stronger. "Free?" she asked, feeling the cold seep into her bones. "How can I do that?" There was no answer, but Raphtalia felt a light touch on her arm, as if someone invisible was trying to guide her. Following this invisible call, she walked towards an old tree, the roots of which looked as if they were twisted in pain. Under the roots, she found a small cave, hidden from prying eyes. Raphtalia's heart beat faster as she descended into the darkness, feeling that she was being led to a solution. Inside the cave, she found an ancient altar, covered in the dust of centuries. On the altar lay a fragment of an ancient sword, which seemed to hold a terrible secret. Raphtalia carefully touched the sword, and in that moment, a vision came over her. She saw how this sword had once belonged to a great warrior who had died protecting his people from an evil attack. His soul and the souls of his comrades were trapped in this place, damned to eternal torment, as they had failed to complete their mission. Raphtalia understood what she had to do. In order to free them, she had to finish the job they had started. She had to fight the ancient evil that lived in the depths of the forest, and thereby break the chains that held these souls captive. When the vision disappeared, Raphtalia was alone in the cave, but now she knew what she had to do. She picked up the broken sword, and its cold steel seemed to merge with her determination. Now she had to find and destroy the evil that had trapped the souls of warriors in this world. But she knew that she could not do it alone. Returning to Neofumi, Raphtalia knew that the time had come to share with him everything that was happening in her soul. There was a dangerous battle ahead, but with Neofumi and their comrades, she felt that together they could defeat even the most ancient evil. Returning to the camp, Raphtalia found Neofumi pacing restlessly in front of her tent. His face was tense and his eyes were full of worry. He had immediately run up to her as soon as she appeared on the horizon. "Where have you been?" he asked, not hiding his excitement. "I've been looking for you everywhere." Raphtalia looked down, feeling guilty for leaving him in the dark once again. She knew it was time to reveal the truth. "I have found the source of the evil that is haunting us," she said softly, looking up at Neofumi. "I need your trust and help." Neofumi paused for a moment, looking into her eyes, full of determination and hidden pain. He knew Raphtalia rarely asked for help, but now her words sounded like a cry from the heart. "Tell me everything," he replied softly, placing his hand on her shoulder. "We can do this together." Raphtalia took a deep breath and began to tell of the visions that had haunted her since that night, the ghosts of fallen warriors and the curse that kept their souls imprisoned. She described the ancient sword she had found in the cave and the evil they had to destroy. When she finished, the camp was silent. Neofumi looked at her seriously, knowing that they had a dangerous path ahead. But his resolve only grew stronger. "If this is what needs to be done, we will do it," he said firmly. "You are not alone, Raphtalia. We are with you." The rest of their comrades, who had been listening to their conversation, agreed to help. With their support, Raphtalia felt her confidence return. She knew that she could overcome her fears and free those souls that suffered because of the ancient curse. The next day, the team headed deeper into the forest, to the cave where the altar was located. The surrounding nature seemed to bristle in anticipation of the coming battle, the trees swaying, making creaking sounds, and the air was thick with tension. Raphtalia felt anxiety building up inside her, but with every step she took next to Neofumi, her fears receded. When they reached the cave, everything was eerily silent. The team gathered at the entrance, checking their equipment and preparing for battle. Raphtalia, holding the broken sword in her hands, felt its cold steel begin to pulse in time with her heartbeat, as if reacting to the approaching evil. Inside the cave, the torchlight cast long shadows on the walls, giving everything an ominous appearance. As they reached the altar, a cold wind suddenly swept through the cave, blowing out the torches and plunging everything into pitch darkness. A roar came from the depths of the cave, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Figures began to emerge from the darkness. They were the same ghosts Raphtalia had seen, but now twisted by the evil that fed their hatred and pain. "You cannot free us," they whispered, drawing closer. "You will only join us." Naofumi, shielding Raphtalia with his shield, prepared for battle. The ghost warriors charged at them with terrible force, and a fierce battle ensued. Raphtalia felt the power of the broken sword come to life in her hands. Each blow to the ghosts echoed in her soul, as if she was fighting not only against enemies, but also against her own fears and doubts. The shadows grew more aggressive, trying to break her will, but Naofumi and his comrades fought back against them, protecting Raphtalia. At some point, the light emanating from the sword fragment began to intensify, illuminating the cave. The ghosts froze, their distorted faces twisted in fear of what was happening. Raphtalia knew it was time to strike the final blow. She stood before the altar, raising the sword fragment high above her head. At that moment, the darkness began to thicken, forming a monster before her, the embodiment of all the evil that lived in these places. Its eyes burned with a red fire, and its breath was poisonous, soaked in hatred and anger. "You cannot defeat me!" the monster roared, its voice echoing throughout the cave. Raphtalia froze for a moment, but then she felt someone's hands touch her shoulder. It was Naofumi. "You can do it," he said quietly, and his words gave her strength. With all her willpower, Raphtalia aimed the broken sword straight at the heart of the monster. The sword's radiance became unbearably bright, and with a terrible scream, the monster crumbled to dust, and with it, the shadows that had tormented her for so long. When the light finally faded, the cave was empty, the only sound remaining was the quiet whisper of the dying wind. The ghosts disappeared, freed from their eternal torment, and Raphtalia felt her heart lighten. Her fears retreated, leaving room for light and hope. Naofumi walked up to Raphtalia and quietly hugged her. "You freed them," he said, warmth in his voice. Raphtalia closed her eyes, feeling the tension drain from her soul, replaced by a deep sense of satisfaction. She knew there would be many trials ahead, but she was no longer afraid of them. With Naofumi and their comrades by her side, she was ready to face any evil, knowing that light would always triumph over darkness. Several days had passed since the ancient evil had been defeated, and Raphtalia, Naofumi, and their companions were returning to the nearest village. She felt lighter, but the feeling of unease had not left her completely. Deep down, she knew that the fight against the darkness was far from over. On the approaches to the village, among the trees, Raphtalia noticed a strange silhouette, a young girl leaning against a tree. She was dressed in light clothes, which contrasted greatly with the gloomy atmosphere of the forest. Her hair was long and silver, and her eyes were deep, like lakes, holding many secrets. "Who are you?" Raphtalia asked warily, coming closer, but still holding her hand on the hilt of her sword. The girl slowly raised her eyes, and Raphtalia noticed something familiar in them, an echo of the pain that she herself had recently experienced. "My name is Lyra," the girl answered quietly, her voice soft but filled with hidden suffering. "I was looking for you, Raphtalia." Naofumi became wary, moving closer to Raphtalia, prepared for any development. "Why were you looking for us?" he asked, watching the stranger carefully. Lyra smiled slightly, but her eyes remained serious. "I saw you free those who were imprisoned in this forest," she said, turning to Raphtalia. "But there is still one soul you have not found." Raphtalia tensed, feeling anxiety creeping up on her. "Who are you really?" she asked. "Why do you say I missed something?" Lyra took a step forward, her face becoming serious. "I am the keeper of ancient knowledge, and it is my job to make sure that no soul remains trapped in the shadow world," she said. "Long ago, there was a great warrior who also died in battle against the evil you destroyed. But her soul was trapped in a place where few dared to step." Raphtalia and Naofumi exchanged glances. It was an unexpected turn of events, especially after they thought they had freed all the trapped souls. But something in Lyra's words made Raphtalia believe her. Do you want us to help free her? Raphtalia asked, looking at Lyra carefully. Lyra nodded. She is waiting for your help. Only someone who has overcome their fears and doubts can free her. But it won't be easy. Raphtalia thought about it. Her own journey to overcome the darkness had been difficult, and now she would have to return to the abyss once again to help someone who needed to be freed as well. But she knew she couldn't turn away from this mission. I will go, she said firmly, looking at Naofumi, who nodded in support. We will do our best. Lyra smiled softly, her eyes filled with gratitude. I will lead you to the place, she said, turning and leading them deeper into the forest. When they reached their destination, a dark and abandoned fortress, hidden by dense undergrowth, opened up before them. Lyra explained that this was where the soul of a great warrior was kept, locked away in an eternal prison. She was my friend, Lyra said quietly as they stopped before the massive gates of the fortress. We fought side by side, but I couldn't save her. Her spirit is now bound to this place. Raphtalia felt her sympathy for Lyra mingle with her own fear of what awaited them inside. But she knew she had to move forward. They entered the fortress, its dark corridors filled with strange whispers, as if the walls themselves spoke of the suffering they had endured. In the center of the castle, they found a huge hall, in the middle of which sat a figure on a throne, bound in dark chains. It was the great warrior Lyra had spoken of. Her eyes were closed, and her face was pale, as if life had left her long ago. But as they approached, the figure opened her eyes, and the hall filled with icy cold. Who dared enter my dungeon? The warrior's muffled voice rang out, full of strength and bitterness. Lyra came closer, her voice full of pain and love. It is I, Lyra. I have come for you. The warrior, whose name was Eris, looked at her, and her eyes filled with tears. You're still alive? She whispered, but then her face twisted in pain. But you shouldn't have come. I'm dangerous. Raphtalia stepped forward, picking up the broken sword that was still with her. We've come to free you, she said firmly. You don't have to suffer here anymore. Eris suddenly rose from her throne, and her chains began to make a terrible cracking sound, as if they were about to break. But her face twisted in pain, and she tried to push them away. No. I can't leave. The darkness, it's still here, waiting to take me. Raphtalia stepped closer, feeling her heart clench in sympathy. She knew that this woman was a prisoner not only of the fortress, but of her own fears. She extended her hand to Lyra and Naofumi, combining their strength. You are no longer alone, she said, looking into Eris' eyes. Let us help you overcome this. Together, we will break these chains. Lyra approached Eris, their hands met, and in that moment, light illuminated the entire hall. The darkness began to recede, the chains breaking under the combined power of Raphtalia, Lyra, and Naofumi. Eris fell to her knees, freed from her bonds, and the hall that. Part V, Call of Destiny. Naofumi cautiously stepped forward, standing next to Raphtalia. He studied Lyra carefully, trying to figure out if she was a threat. He saw something dark in her eyes, but she also looked vulnerable, like someone who had been through a lot. Why were you looking for Raphtalia? Naofumi asked, not hiding his distrust. His voice was firm, but not hostile. Lyra looked down, as if choosing her words before speaking again. I am connected to the darkness you destroyed. My soul was trapped in this forest for a long time. I was part of that ancient evil, but now I am free. Raphtalia felt her heart clench. She knew what it was like to be captured by forces you could not control. But Lyra was more than just a victim. There was something odd about her voice and demeanor, as if she was hiding something. How were you connected to that evil? Raphtalia asked carefully. She felt that the answer to that question was important not only for Lyra, but for herself as well. Lyra paused for a moment before continuing. I was part of an ancient ritual. Long ago, to defeat the evil, my soul was sacrificed to seal it. But instead of destroying it, the ritual only united us. Since then, I have been its prisoner, sharing its pain and hatred. When you destroyed the monster, you freed me, but now I don't know what to do." Naofumi thought for a moment, trying to process what he had heard. "You say that you were part of that monster, but now you are free. Does that mean that the darkness can no longer return?" Lyra shook her head. "The darkness never completely disappears. It can return if it finds a new home. That is why I have come to you. I sense that remnants of that power still exist in this world, and they can awaken again." Raphtalia looked at Lyra, feeling a deep connection with her. She realized that Lyra had gone through the same ordeal as she had, and that they now had a common enemy. "Do you wish to join us?" Raphtalia asked, unexpectedly to herself. She felt that Lyra could be an important ally in their future battles. Lyra looked up, hope shining in her eyes. "If you accept me, I will help you. I know how to find the remaining fragments of that power. We can destroy them before they become a threat." Naofumi looked at Lyra carefully once more, and then nodded, agreeing with Raphtalia. "We will accept your help, Lyra. But know that if we feel danger, we will be forced to protect ourselves." Lyra nodded in agreement. "I understand. And I am ready to prove my loyalty." The team set off again, now with a new ally. Raphtalia felt that their path would become even more difficult, but with Lyra by their side, they had a better chance of dealing with new threats. As they went deeper into the forest, Raphtalia glanced at Lyra from time to time. In her soul, there was now a hope that together they could not only destroy the remnants of darkness, but also help Lyra find the peace that she had been deprived of for so long. Her strength returned, and Raphtalia managed to break the circle of ghosts. She rushed towards the light, towards Naofumi, who was waiting for her on the other side of the darkness. Looking back, she saw how the ghosts gradually dissolved, their accusing gazes fading. But their words remained with her, as a reminder of how much pain was hidden in her heart. As the darkness dissipated, Raphtalia found herself in Naofumi's arms, feeling the warmth and protection that she had been missing so much. She knew that she had yet to learn to live with this pain, but now she knew that she was not alone.